8:10, by the way, happening today. A big vote at the state capitol on the budget.
And this is a couple of key issues, had some surprising results, and Ryan is joining us right now with more on that, right?
Yeah, Amy and Bob, good morning. Specifically, no deal for medical marijuana. We're going to talk to political analyst Mike Haridopolos now about that. We'll get to that in a minute. Today's the budget. They hope to vote Friday, but today's the day they come in and approve this budget. But it's more what's going to happen after this vote, correct?
Absolutely. The good news is no tax increase, $82 billion budget. They're just coming in literally to vote yes and then go home. But the real question, how much of the budget will Rick Scott veto, if not the whole darn thing?
Yeah, because we had him in last week, and there were clearly some issues, Mike, that he's not happy with here.
He is very much disappointed in the legislature because he wanted to put Visit Florida out in front. We've had a huge number of visitors, or in fact a record number of visitors over the last few years. He wanted to pump up that budget even more because those bring in new jobs and more money to the state. About one quarter of all of our tax revenue actually comes from tourists, so he's trying to pump that number up. They had a big fight with the legislature, specifically the Speaker. The Speaker said, sorry, we're not going to do it. So I think you're going to see some vetoes along the line. Yeah,
when the governor was here, he thought this was an overreaction. He thought jobs would be lost. How quickly do the leaders of this party put that behind him now on a big issue?
Well, it's going to be tough. We're going to see over the next few weeks as he gets the budget in hand. Will he veto the whole thing and have them come back? They could override. It takes 2/3 in both the House and Senate. That's rarely done. In fact, it's only been done roughly once in the last 20 years. So it's not an everyday thing. Or he might just individually go through the budget and say, sorry, you're not going to get this program or that program, which is probably the more likely.
And they also tackled stand your ground. We've heard a lot about this going back to the George Zimmerman case, and they focused on the word attack here in this case.
Yeah, it was important. As you know, we're very much in defense. The Second Amendment is sacred here in the state of Florida, and rightfully so. Right to carry, concealed carry specifically. This is putting more protections for those folks who use a gun in the protection of their home, stand your ground, to make sure that the prosecutor basically has a better case, to put it nicely. And they wanted to make sure that person had that protection. Now, there's some people who say that's too loose. It might create some real awkward situations, or might get some people off from actually who had committed murder. But in general, people believe in standing your ground, that in some parts of our state that aren't so safe, they want to have that gun for the protection of their life and property, and the prosecutors now have a higher standard in which to prosecute in some of these cases.
And Mike, we mentioned earlier on the toss to us, no deal for medical marijuana, which means despite the 71% that voted for this is going to go back to the Department of Health.
It is. 71% of the voters said yes to medical marijuana, and the legislature in essence said no. John Morgan, we know the biggest proponent of this, is calling for a special session because there was no vote on this. It came really, really close, but now, as you said, the Department of Health, not legislators, will be writing the rules, which I expect to follow a lot of lawsuits.
They've been criticized before for that, which is interesting. What about this deal that fell through? Did they think they had it at the end, it just didn't work out?
Yeah, I was very surprised. As you know, I'm up there regularly, and as the waning hours of the session were coming through, it looked like they had a deal at the last second. They had a dispute about a number of dispensaries, meaning that the locations that a company could own. That shuttled the deal. Now we'll have to find out if they'll come back in a special session or the Department of Health writing those laws. But John Morgan, I know, is not happy. He had a Twitter blast, to say the least, Donald Trump-esque on Friday night, Saturday morning. He was not happy.
Yeah, he was not happy. Let's finish with this. We had a group of state leaders here in Orlando talking about fentanyl last week, and they addressed this as well.
Yeah, this is the problem in our state. Many years ago, we took on the issue of opioids and others, and we did a pretty good job of reducing it. Pam Bondi and myself, the governor, all worked on this. My wife actually did a really good job. To give her credit. But now you have this other issue with fentanyl. We need to be very vigilant in making sure that this has not become an even bigger crisis. I'm glad to see not only our state government, but the national government addressing this issue, because we have so many problems in our state. This is just one that's been leaped on top of others.
Mike, great insight. There's always a lot to get through in the State House, and some of the dealing with as well. So I hope you enjoyed us on Facebook as well. A lot to talk about. Let's get to Jamie King, who is looking at a pretty